We begin today the Gemara on Daf Samach Zayin, Amud Beis, 5 or 6 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Ein hagaynev acha ganev. Okay. So in the Mishnah, it said that Ein hagaynev acha ganev mishalem tashlumi kefil. This halacha of ben kefil that the Torah says, Shnayim Yishalem, is only for the ganev himself. Not if you steal from someone else that already stole this. The Torah says that the payment of kefil is only mi beis ha... Let me see again the lashon of the pasuk. Rashi quotes in the Mishnah that if you steal it, mi beis haganev. V'gunav mi beis ish, that is. V'gunav mi beis ish, v'lo mi beis haganev. Not if you steal from the ganev, then you don't pay kefil. Okay. Omar Rav, so Rav says on this, lo yishanu. This distinction the Mishnah said was only true elo lifnei yish. If the second ganev steals it from the first ganev before there's any yish, before the original owner gives up hope on it. But if it's after Yish, then Konoi Ganev Rishon, just through Yish itself, the first Ganev now acquires what he stole. And as we learned before, that means that he only pays back the money for it, but the object itself he can keep. And therefore, the Ganev Sheni, Mishalem Tashlumi Kefil, the Ganev Rishon, the second Ganev, now steals something that is owned by the first Ganev, and he has to pay Kefil, just like the first Ganev pays Kefil, he also has to pay Kefil to the first Ganev. Rav Sheishe, so now on this Rav Sheishe said, Amina, I say, Kinayim v'shachiv Rav, when Rav was awake and sleeping, he was dozing off, Omar laha shmaite. Rav said this halacha. Okay, so what's the point of the Chiddush of Rav's halacha here? That when you steal something and the original owner is miyayish, the yish itself is kaina. Now it's yours and you only pay back the money. The emes is that this opinion of Rav here, we had already before in the Gemara. Rabbi said this, Rav Yosef argued on it. That was we had already the whole discussion about this, whether Yish alone is kaina by Gneve. Here Rav is saying, similar to what Rav said before, that Yish itself is kaina. And the Gemara here is going to come back and bring different rayas regarding this subject. And Taisus here says that really, the rayas that the Gemara brings here, the Gemara could have asked the same questions before on Rabba, and the questions the Gemara asked before on Rabba could have asked on Rav. Rav and Rabba are saying the same point, that Yish is kaina by Gneve. And it's on that point that Rav Sheisha says it's a big chiddush, and Rav must have been up, awake, sleeping when he said this. So what's his question? The first question is from the Braisa, the Tanya. The Braisa says, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, why did the Torah say if you steal an animal and then you take it and slaughter it or sell it, so you have to pay such a big penalty 4 or 5 times as much? So the reason is because this person got entrenched in the Aveda that he did. Now the diak of the word nishtarish is that he did one Aveda of stealing it, but then he did a second Aveda, which is sort of another gzeli. He's doing another action to take it away from the original owner. Like when you slaughter it. When you slaughter it, now the original owner can't get back his animal that was stolen. And when you go and you sell it, now it's sold and the sale takes effect. Once the sale takes effect, so now the original owner can't get it back because the sale took effect. So because you're doing a second Aveda, which takes it away from the owner to a further degree, so therefore you have to pay an extra knas, dalet v'hei for this. So now, the Gemara explains, what was Rabbi Akiva saying here? Amos, what is the case here? If the case over here is regarding selling, that he sold this animal, and you paid dalet v'hei. He sold it even before the original owner was miyayish, mi ikin nishtarish. Can you say that he got entrenched in the Aveda in the sense that the second action of Geneva by selling it that he did had a real effect? It doesn't even take effect at all. Before any Yish, if you sell the item you stole to someone else, the sale doesn't take effect at all. So it's still in its previous status of Geneva. So nothing really changed over here. So how can we say nishtarish that you're furthering your Aveda by now taking it away from the owner to a further extent? You're not taking it away from him any further. That's the taich of nishtarish though. The taich of nishtarish, what does it explain? Nishtarish means that you actually did another action that took it further away from him, but you didn't. So elo la'acha yish. It must be that we're talking about after yish. The original owner was miyayish. And therefore, now when you sell it, so now there's Yush, and then when you sell it, there's something else together with the Yush. Yush and Shini Rishus. The fact that the original owner was Miyayish, and now you sold it to someone else, the change of ownership together with Yush, that the sale, that causes the sale does take effect, and now you just furthered this Aveda in the sense that it did take effect and you took it away from the owner. That's what Rabbi Kiva was saying. But now the question on the Rav over here is, if what Rav says is true, that Yush itself is already, it brings into effect a king that the Ganav owns it. So then, why should you pay 4 or 5 times as much if you shecht it or if you sell it after the Yush of the original owner? The object itself, the animal itself is yours, and you just have to pay back money for it. So Amri, they answered for this, that the way to understand what Rabbi Kiva said is different. The meaning of nishtarish means like Kedama Rava, that is. Like Rava said that regarding this, and you could apply what Rava said over here as well. Now what does nishtarish mean? Because the Ganev repeated the Aveda. So it's not that he really took it any more away. He did another action that really took effect to take it more away from the original owner. No, it didn't. Because it's before Yush and it doesn't have any further effect. The sale, if he sells it, doesn't change anything. But Shana Bechet, the fact is that he did another action, that he tried to sell it to someone, so he's repeating his Aveda. That's why the Torah gave this penalty of paying Dal Dvei. So Achanami here as well, this is what Rabbi Kiva means, Shana Bechet. He repeated the Aveda, even though you're right, and nothing else nothing took effect over here through his sale, because we're talking about before Yush. Tashema, the Gemara asks from another Braisa, again on Rav's opinion, that says that Yush itself by Geneva is Kaina. So the Braisa says, in the Pasuk it says, V'tavchay mochrei. A person either slaughtered the animal or sold the animal. So we compare the two. It's just like when you slaughter the animal, you have to pay Dal Dvehei, because when you slaughter it, the animal is not coming back alive. Af Mechires, so too when it says if you sell it, you pay Dal Dvehei, She'enech Chezeres. This is a sale that doesn't return back to its owner. So what does the Braisa mean by this expression that the sale doesn't go back to its owner? Amos, that is. When are we talking about? If the Ganav sells it before there's any Yush, why, if you sell it, wouldn't it go back to the original owner? If there's no Yush, it still belongs to the original owner. If you sell it, the sale does not take effect at all. So this Braisa must be talking about after Yush. And like we said before, once you miyayish and then you sell it, so now you have a Yush. And Shini Rishos, a change of possession, so therefore this is a permanent sale. It doesn't go back to the original owner. That's why it's similar to slaughtering it. But now, if what Rav said is true, that just Yush alone makes it yours completely, so then Amay Mishalom Dalad Vehei. So why, if you sell it after Yush, do you even have to pay it all for this? The Yush itself is kindness, so it already belongs to the Ganav, and then when you sell it, you're selling what belongs to you. You only have to pay back money. Answers the Gemara, Kedam Rav Nachman will answer here like what Rav Nachman answered to a similar question, that what we're learning out of here is Prat l'shehikna l'shloishim yom. Really, it's talking about before Yush. And true, the sale that the person is doing here does not take effect. But it doesn't matter. He tried to sell it permanently, then he's going to be chayiv to pay Dalad Vehei. What we're excluding over here is in a case where he sells this animal to someone for 30 days, basically renting it to him. Then you're not going to be chayiv to pay Dalad Vehei, because it's just for 30 days and then it comes back. Ochanami over here, this is what the Braisa means, Prat l'shehikna l'shloishim yom. When you sell it just for 30 days, then there's no payment of Dalad Vehei. Meisvei, another question was asked on Rav from a Braisa. So here the Braisa has 3 different cases. Okay, so pay attention over here to the 3 cases, because the Gemara is going to discuss all of them. So the first case is Gonav, a person steals an animal, and then a Boachav, a Gonvai. Someone else came and stole it from you, like the case that we started off with in the Mishnah. So Harishay Mishalim Tashlumi Kefil, the first one that stole this animal, so he's a Ganev, and he has to pay, like always, Kefil for it. Vasheni, the second one that stole from the first one, Eina Mishalim Elakedem Bilvat. He only pays the principal of what he stole. And that's like the halacha we learned before, that the second Ganev, he didn't steal it from the original owner, Mibesa Ish, so he only pays Keren. Another case, Gonav, the first Ganev stole, Umachar, and he already sold it also. Uboacher, and a second Ganev comes, V'gonvoi, and steals it from this buyer. So Arisha Mishalem, Tashlumi Bava Kama. The first Ganev has to pay 4 or 5 times because he stole and sold it afterwards. Vasheni, the second one that steals it from the buyer, Mishalem Tashlumi Kefil, he has to pay Kefil. Because once the first Ganev sold it, so here we're talking about a case where there was Yush, and he sold it as well. So there's a shini rishus. Yiyush together with shini rishus, everybody holds that the second ganav, the buyer that is acquires it. So therefore, the second ganav has to pay kefil for stealing it from this buyer. A third case, ganav v'tovach. A person stole and he went and slaughtered it. Obach of a gunvoy, and then a second ganav came and stole this meat, the slaughtered animal. The first one pays dalad vehei because he stole and slaughtered. The second one that stole this slaughtered animal does not pay any kefil. He only pays keren alone. Okay, now that the Gemara will ask on, because it doesn't really make sense. Why should he not have to pay kefil? Once there was a yish and he slaughtered it. Slaughtering the animal is a shini maisa. It's a new thing now. It's not anymore a live animal. So for sure, the second ganev should have to pay kefil for this because he's kainit with a shini maisa. Okay, the Gemara will ask on that. Let's see. So now here the Gemara says is a clear raya against Rav. Why? Katani miya mitzis. So what does it say in the middle case of this brayse? The first ganav stole it and then he sold it. And a second person steals it from the buyer. The first one pays dalad vehei, v'asheni mishal tashlumi kefil, and the second one pays kefil. Now, Amos, what is this brayse talking about? If there is no yish over here of the original owner, so sheni amay mishalam tashlumi kefil. Why are we saying that the second person, when he steals from the buyer, that he pays kefil? Why should he pay kefil? Shinui rishus, when there's a change of possession regarding an item stolen. Below yish, if there's no yish of the original owner, is there anybody that holds that just a shini rishus itself creates a kinyan? There's no such a thing. By every ganev, when he steals, there's a shini rishus. Now he sold it to someone else. It's also a shini rishus, but there's no kinyan by that. You still have to return the ganeva as is. It has to be both yish and shini rishus in order for that to be a kinyan. So Pshita, it's obvious what this brayse is speaking about is la'acha yish. The original owner was miyayish. Now, if what Rav says is true, that yish alone is already a full kinyan on this object. So then, amay mishalim tashlumi dalad vehei. Why does it say that the first ganev, after the original owner was miyayish and he sold it to someone else, that the first ganev pays dalad vehei? Why is he paying dalad vehei? He's a kainit already. He just has to pay back money. The day who dissolving, he's selling what belongs to him now. So he shouldn't have to pay anything. So another question, diktoni ratio. When it says in the first case of this brayse, Ganav, the first person stole, and then Boba, Gonvoy, and a second person stole from the first Ganev. So it said that Risha Mishalim Tashlumi Kefil, the first Ganev pays Kefil, Vasheni Mishalim Melekeren, and the second one only pays the principal. But why is that? Mechti, let's see. As we just explained, La'acha Yish Kaiminot. This brayse is talking about when the original owner was Mayayish. If like Rav says, Yish alone is Kaine, so Sheni Amayim Mishalim Melekeren. So why is the second person that's stealing from the first Ganev, why doesn't he pay only keren? Now the first Ganev becomes the full-fledged owner of this object. He only pays back money. So the second Ganev is actually stealing it from the now new owner. So he should pay kefil as well. So we have from the two first cases of this brayse clear raya that yish itself is not kaine. The kashil Rav. This is a question on Rav that said that yish is kaine. So the Gemara is going to give two answers for this. So first, Rav says, is it logical to ask a question on Rav from this brayse? Do you think that this brayse is accepted, it's understood, and we can prove something from here? So what does it say in the last case of the brayse? A person steals and he slaughters the animal. A second person comes and steals the meat. So the brayse said, the first one pays 4 or 5 times because he slaughtered it. The second person just pays the principal of that meat that he stole. But why is that so? Why is the second person only paying keren? Is there anybody that is of the opinion that shini maisa lekani, that when you steal something and there's yish here, and besides the yish there's also a shini maisa, you change the physical object itself, you slaughtered it, and now it's a new thing, it's just meat. Is there anybody that holds it you shouldn't be kaina? For sure, now you're kaina by slaughtering it. So if so, why is the second Ganev that's stealing this only paying keren? He's stealing it from the now new owner. So therefore, we have a problem here with this, the last case of the brayse. So we have to reinterpret this whole brayse. It says Rav as follows: Really, this entire brayse is talking about a person steals something and there is no yish. The original owner never gave up. The epech seifa lemitziasa u'mitziasa leseifa. We have to switch the halacha that it said in the seifa of this brayse that applies to the middle case, and the halacha that it said in the middle case, that applies to the last case of the Braisa. And he explains, and since we're talking about before Yush, so you can read and explain the Braisa as follows. If you stole something and then you sold it, and then another person comes and steals this animal from the buyer. So the first one that sold it pays 4 or 5 times as much. And the reason he pays 4 or 5 times as much is because he sold it, and there was no yush here yet, so he's stealing and then selling it. And the second one that stole from the buyer, he only pays keren. Here we apply what we before said is the din of the last case. Now we say over here, no, that's the din over here in the middle case, that he only pays keren. Why is that? Because the sheni rishus below yush, like Kani, the case over here is that there was no yush at all. It's just a change of possession. You sold it to someone else, but it still belongs to the original owner. So in such a case, when you steal from someone else, not the original owner, you only pay keren. That's the middle case of the Braisa. Ganav v'tovach. Then the last case of the Braisa is when the first ganav stole and he slaughtered it. Then someone else comes and steals this meat. Harisha mishal tashlume above chamisha. The first one pays above chamisha for slaughtering it, and v'hasheni mishal tashlume kefil. And the second one does pay kefil. Why? Even though there was no yush here, but the kanye b'shini maise. Even without any yush, shini maise, when you actually change the physical item itself, then you acquire it. The person that's slaughtered it now acquires it just by the shini maise. So someone else that steals it now is stealing it from the now new owner, and you have to pay kefil. That's Rav's pshat. So there's no question here on Rav. This Braisa is speaking about before Yush. Papa says, no, Leilam Leitepach, you don't have to switch the halachas of this Braisa. Our question was, what's the pshat in the Sefer? Why after you slaughtered it, do you say that he didn't acquire it? And the one that steals this meat does not have to pay kefil? The answer is Sefer, the last case over here in this Braisa. What it shows us is that Beishami. It's going according to the opinion of Beishami, which we had quoted before here in the Perek. The Omri Beishami say Shinoi, even after there is a physical change in the item, B'mekayma oimid, it still remains in its place, meaning the original owner still has his ownership over it. The physical change does not change that. That's the halach of the last case, and therefore, even after you slaughtered it, there is no kinyan here, and you don't pay kefil for this. But even after we explained the last case of the Braisa, okay, so that's understood, but we go back now to the previous cases. But our question from the first and middle case on Rav, if it's talking about after Yush, so how could the middle case of the Braisa say that that the person that sells it or slaughters it is chayiv to pay dal v'hei? If you're kainet, according to Rav, there shouldn't be any payment. Or in the first case, why does it say that the second ganav only pays keren? If the first ganav was kainet, the second ganav should pay kefil. That question from the first and the middle case still remains if we're talking about after Yush. Rav Zvid explains, La'olam kula lifnei Yush. No, really similar to what Rav said before. The first two cases, or the whole Braisa really is all talking about before there was any Yush over here. However, what are we talking about over here? First the Gemara focuses on the middle case. Regarding the middle case, before the first ganav sold it, there was no Yush yet. But however, the case over here is after it was sold. Once it was in the possession of this lekeach, now the original owner sees that it was already sold to someone else. Now he's miyayish, he gives up on it. But v'lo nisyashu beganav. There was no yush in the possession of the Ganav. The Havale yush, but at this point, though, in the possession of the Lekeach, there is yush. So this explains the middle case that on one hand, the first Ganav that sells it or slaughters it, he would be chayiv to pay dalad v'hei, because there was no yush yet when he sold it. Yush, according to Rav, makes a full kinyan, but there was no yush yet, so he pays dalad v'hei. But after the buyer has it in his possession, the Ganav was miyayish. So now, if the second person comes along and steals it from him, there's a full kinyan here. Because there's a yush now in the possession of the lekeach with a sheni rishos. There was a change of possession that it went from the first ganav to the second ganav. So therefore now when the second person steals it from him, you have to pay kefil. Okay, but now the Gemara goes back to the first case of the Braisa here. What was the first case? Simply when one person steals and a second person steals from the first person. So the Gemara now wants to understand, if you're coming to tell me this halacha, that the second person, when he steals after Yush, he has to pay kefil. Even though usually we say a second ganav does not pay kefil, because he's not stealing it from an owner. But if you steal after Yush, so then you do pay kefil. So still the question remains on Rav regarding the first case of this Braisa. Why does the Braisa only say this halacha, that after Yush, the second ganav pays kefil regarding the second case, where the first ganav sold it to another ganav? Why can't we just say this regarding the first case of the Braisa, where there's a ganav, and the second ganav steals directly from the first ganav, and it's after Yush, and because it's after Yush, you pay kefil. So the Gemara now explains why the Braisa didn't say that in the first case. Now don't think that when it comes to the first case, Mishom de bein on Yush v'shinei rishos, since Yush itself is not kaina. The only way Yush would be kaina is if you additionally sold it, and there's a Yush and a change of possession. And therefore, this halacha that the second ganav pays kefil is only possible in the second case where he actually sold it. But in the first case where the first ganav didn't sell it, there's no possibility for him ever paying kefil, and that would be a question on Rav. Because Rav said that Yush alone is kaina. Says the Gemara, no, that's not true. Like Rav said, even with Yush alone, you will be kaina. Gabe ganav, even if it's by the original ganav, without any additional sheni rishus, Yush itself is a kinyan. So why did the Braisa in the first case not just simply say that the second ganav pays kefil if there was a Yush when it's in the possession of the first ganav? Elo, the loy mishkachas, the mishalmi tarvayu, ganav rishon, the ganav sheni, ela bahachi. The Braisa wanted to give you a scenario where both the first ganav can still pay his penalty of dalad vehei, and the second ganav pays also his penalty of kefil, and therefore it spells out this case only in a case where it was sold. The emes is that it could have said the same case also regarding the first case, where it's still in the possession of the ganav, because like Rav says, once there's Yush, then the second ganav that steals, you pay kefil. But I wanted to show you this chiddush that the first ganav pays his penalty, which one? The dalad v'hei, and the second one still pays kefil. And that could be in a case where before you sold it, there was no Yush yet. So therefore there was no kinyan yet, so you paid dalad v'hei for selling it. But if there's a Yush after you sold it, so now, because there's a Yush here, so then you pay kefil, the second ganav pays kefil. So therefore there's no question on Rav from this Braisa. The Gemara now brings other opinions regarding this subject. Itmer, we learned a machlekes about the subject regarding a person that stole and then slaughtered or sold the animal. So the machlekes we learned is hamayche lefnei yush. If you sell this animal before there was any yush. So Rav Nachman says chayev, you're chayev to pay the dalad v'hei for selling what you stole before yush. Rav Shesha sama potter. Rav Shesha says no, if you sell it before yush, you're going to be potter. Okay, so now the Gemara explains. Now, but before we go right in the Gemara over here, the point over here of their machlekes is basically after Yush. So then everybody agrees that for sure you're going to be chayiv to pay dalad v'hei. Both Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes actually disagree with what Rav said before. Rav said that Yush itself is kaina. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes disagree with that. Yush itself is not kaina. So therefore, after Yush, it's still yours. So if you sell it, you're going to be chayav dalad v'hei because you're selling something that doesn't belong to you. And in such a case, for sure, everyone agrees you're going to be chayav. What happens when you sell it after Yush, it's still yours, but now that you sell it, there's a second thing that comes in here, Yush and Sheni Rishos. And therefore, the sale that you sold takes effect in a permanent way. And therefore, for sure, for that, you're going to be chayav to pay dalad v'hei. The machlekes of Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes is, before Yush, if you go ahead and sell it. Now, when you sell it before Yush, your sale does not take effect at all. So the question is, are you going to be chayiv to pay dalad v'hei before Yush, even though your sale does not take effect? So Gemara explains now this point here. Let's see. Rav Nachman says you are going to be chayiv because the Torah says if you sell it, you pay dalad v'hei v'hazavin, and he sold it. Loishna lifnei Yush doesn't make a difference if it's before Yush. Loishna lach Yush doesn't make a difference if it's after Yush. What that means is even though after Yush your sale permanently takes effect, because now you have two things, Yush and Sheni Rishos. And if it's before Yush, and it's only going to be Sheni Rishos that you sold it, the sale does not take effect, but it doesn't make a difference. You attempted to sell it. That's the reason why you pay dalad v'hei. That's Rav Nachman. Rav Sheshes saw my potter. Rav Sheshes says if it's before Yush, you're going to be potter. Why? Because chiyuv la'acha Yishu, you only chayiv if you sell it after Yush, because the ahanu ma'isov. after Yush alone is not kaina, but Yush together with Sheni Rishos is kaina. So then the action of you selling it takes effect. It's permanent. So then you pay the Dal Vehei. Avalifne Yush, but if you're selling it before Yush, the act that you didn't take effect at all. So loy mechayiv, you're not going to be chayiv to pay Dal Vehei. And he says, because dumye the tficha, we compare the selling it to when you slaughter it. Be'inon. The ahano ma'asav, it has to be just like tficha, where the action you did has a permanent effect, like when you slaughter it.
You slaughter it years.
By slaughtering it, the years doesn't matter at all. Because over there it's a shini ma'isa. You change it over there, it doesn't make a difference. Rav Sheshis now says, what's the source of my opinion? So here the Gemara brings back the same braises that are brought before. The Tanya before, as we brought in the braisa, why is the Torah say that if you slaughter or you sell something that you stole, so you pay 4 or 5 times as much? You got entrenched in the Aveda. You took it further away from the original owner. Now, Amos, when is this talking about? If you sell it before there was any Yush, could you say that you took it further away from the owner? The sale that you didn't take effect at all. It must be talking about after Yush. And what it's saying is that even though Yush itself is not kaina, as I mentioned, both of Nachman and Rav Sheshes disagree with Rav, but the Yush together with the Sheni Rishos, that you're selling it, now it takes effect. So therefore, it's nishtarish. You took it away from the owner completely. Rav, so here it's on this that Rav answered and said, no, even though the sale did not take effect, but because you attempted to sell it, so you're repeating an Aveda, that's why you pay Dalt Veh, even though it does not take effect. Again, the Gemara brings the Braisa from before, Toshamat, the Braisa says, so we compare them. It's just like when you slaughter, it's not returning to its original condition. You only chayav for the sale when you sell it, to pay Dalt Veh, if it doesn't come back. So Amos, when is this talking about? If there's no yish here, why doesn't it go back to the original owner? The whole sale didn't take effect at all. Yish must be talking about after yish. What we see over here is what the Bryce is saying is that you only chayiv if it was after yish together with the shini rishos, then it takes effect, and it's similar to slaughtering where it doesn't go back to its original condition. Rav Nachman, so it's here what Rav Nachman explained and said, no, over here it's really before Yush and the sale does not take effect, but you attempted to sell it permanently. And what it's saying is, this excludes someone that's only renting it basically. He's selling it to someone just for 30 days. In such a case, you're not chayiv. The Gemara brings another Amayra. V'af Rabbi Elazar Sova. Rabbi Elazar also holds chiyuve la'acha yishu, that the chiyuv of paying for Dal Vehei is only after Yush, not before Yush, because then the sale does not take effect. Amar Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Elazar said as follows: Teida, I'll prove to you shestam geneva Yush bailamhu. I'll prove to you that any stam geneva, we assume that the original owner that doesn't know who it is that stole it from him gives up on this. There's a yish there automatically. That's our assumption. Why? So his proof is because the Torah says if you slaughter what you stole or you sell it, you have to pay 4 or 5 times as much. So why are you paying 4 or 5 times as much if the sale did not take effect? It must be that there is a stam assumption that there's a yish here already. And because there's a yish, now that you sell it, there's also a shini rishos together with the yish, and therefore you pay Dal Vehei. Can't you say that the original owner was not miyayish, so your sale didn't do anything? Stam geneva is a yish bailam, and therefore you have yish and shini rishos, and that's why you pay Dal Vehei. So you see here clearly Rabbi Elazar holds that you only pay Dal Vehei after yish, because then your sale takes effect. But how does Rabbi Elazar prove this? Maybe the Torah is saying that you pay a Dal Vehei even though there was no yish, just by the fact that you attempted to sell it, even though the sale does not take effect. So Omri, the answer to this, like the Svara that Rav Shesha said before, you can't say that because we compare selling to slaughtering. Just like when you slaughter, so it's a permanent thing. So to selling, you pay Dal Vehei because it's permanent, it takes effect. But if it's before yish, mayahanu. So how does your action of selling have any effect? It doesn't. So therefore you must say that stam geneva is a yish, and therefore the Torah says that you pay Dal Vehei when you sell it. But the question still is, how could you prove from here that this is true by stam geneva, by every geneva? The dilma, maybe the Torah says that you pay Dal Vehei if the ganav sells it. The shamine de yayish, only in a case where you clearly hear the original owner that said that he's miyayish. How do you know that this is true by every stam geneva? So Amri, to that they answered, no, loisal kedaitach. You can't say that the Torah is limiting the payment of Dalat Vei only when you hear the original owner being Meyayish. Because again, Dumya the Tficha, we compare to when he slaughtered it. Ma Tficha alter, just like if you slaughter the animal that you stole, so immediately, even without any yish, just a shini maisa, so it has its effect and it's not going back to its original condition. Af mechire la alter. So too by a ganef that sells what he stole, you chayiv even if you sell it right away, because we assume that the ganef right away gave up because he doesn't know who the ganef is. This was what Rabbi Elazar said. Now, Rabbi Elazar was actually a student of Rabbi Yochanan. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan says to him, no, you can't. You don't have to compare the mechire to tfiche to say that that it takes effect the sale. There's a yush and then it takes effect, and therefore you're going to be chayiv. Geneve benefesh techiach. I'll prove to you from a different case of geneve benefesh. Geneve benefesh is kidnapping. The pasuk says if a person kidnaps someone and then he sells this person, so he's chayiv misa. So over there, she'en yish bailim. If you kidnap a human being, the human being is never giving up on himself. And you're selling him, the whole sale really doesn't take effect. There's no, you can't sell a person, there is no yish and shini reshus. And shini reshus itself does not change anything. So over there, in such a case where you're selling a person that you kidnap, the sale does not take effect. And the chayiv, and the Torah says you're still chayiv. So what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that even before yish, if you sell something that you stole, you still should be chayiv dalat vei. As the Gemara says, Miklal, from this question that Rabbi Yochanan is asking, what do we see? The Savar Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that lifnei yish chayiv la'acha yish. Lifnei yish chayiv, that is. Rabbi Yochanan knows that if you steal something and then before yish you sell it, so then you're going to be chayiv. Why? Because if you sell it before yish, the sale that you did not take effect. But it doesn't matter. The very fact that you attempted to sell it, you're chayav for that. And Rabbi Yochanan is proving this from kidnapping. When you sell a person that you kidnap, the sale doesn't take effect, but you're still chayav for that. So he argues with Rabbi Elazar and with Rabbi Sheshes. But now the Gemara inquires, la'acha yishmai. How about after yish? What is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan? If you slaughter or sell something after yish, are you going to be chayav dal dvei? What the Gemara basically wants to know is, does Rabbi Yochanan agree to Rav that says that after yish, you acquire it completely, so now if you slaughter it afterwards, you should be potter? Or no, yish alone is not a kinyan. That's the shayler. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan ama chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rav. Rabbi Yochanan says, yish alone is not kind of by geneva, and so if you slaughter it or sell it after yish, you're still chayiv. But Rish Lakish ama potter. Rish Lakish says, no, that you're going to be potter. Rish Lakish holds like Rav. Rabbi Yochanan ama chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan says, chayiv, chiyuve, ben lifnei yish, ben lachish. There's no difference. Before yish, after yish, you're always going to be chayiv for attempting to sell it, even if the king does not take effect. Rish Lakish ama potter. Rish Lakish says you're going to be potter chiyuve lifnei yishu, only before yish you chayiv, because then it doesn't belong to you. You're stealing and then selling what belongs to the owner. Avalacha yish kana. After yish, like Rav said before, you kind of now it's yours. So therefore, for that you're not going to be chayiv. Hey, it's Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asks Rish Lakish. It says in a brayse, gonav v'hiktish. A person steals something, and then all of a sudden he's a tzaddik. He's giving it a hektish. And then after that, v'achakach tovach, and then he goes and slaughters this that he stole, and he gave it a hektish. Mishalim tashlumi kefil. So for this, for the geneva itself, he's going to have to pay double. But he doesn't pay 4 or 5 times as much, because once he was makdish it, so over here, there is no payment of kefil. Rashi brings the pasuk that there is no payment of kefil once you're makdish it, and if there is no payment of kefil, there is no payment of dalat v'hei either. Okay, but now, so Amos, what cases is Vraisa talking about? Is the case over here that the Ganav stole, and there was no yish of the original owner, and he was makdish it to hektish. And it's on that case that it's saying that if he slaughters it afterwards, he's going to be potter. But mikdash, if there was no yish of the original owner, he doesn't have the power to be makdish it. Why not? As pasuk says, ish ki yakdish es beisay. A person can be makdish his house, kaidish, and it should be hektish. Amar Rachmana. That's what the Torah says. What do we learn from this? Ma beisay shaloi, a house that you own, it's yours. That you can be makdish. Av kol shaloi, anything that's yours. But over here, even if you steal something and it's in your possession now, but the fact that you're possessing it, it's not yours, you can't be makdish it. If there's no yish here, it doesn't belong to you at all. You have to return it to the owner. How could you be makdish it? So what does it say? That if you makdish it, it belongs now to hectares, so if you slaughter it, you're potter. How is he being makdish it? Obviously the case over here is la'acha yish. The owner was miyayish already. Now, if so, Rabbi Leish Lakish asks, that is, what does it say in this Braise? The time, the hikdish, and the reason why you don't pay over here, dalt vehei, if he slaughtered it after this, is because he already was makdish it. Once it belongs to hektish, so then it's not re'ehu, as the Pasuk Rashi brings it. It's not something that belongs to anyone, a friend. It belongs to hektish. The chikatavach, the hektish katavach. So he's slaughtering something that belongs to hektish. V'loy hektish. But if he was not makdish it, tavach, and he slaughtered it, even though it's after Yush already, as we proved, this Bryce is talking about after Yush. You still pay 4 or 5 times for slaughtering it. If what Rabbi Yochanan and Rav said that Yush itself is kaina, amai mishalem, why does he pay for this? What you're slaughtering and selling belongs to you already. So why does the Bryce say only if you makdish it that you don't pay? Just the Yush itself, you acquire it and it's yours now. Rabbi Yochanan answered, you misunderstood the Braisa. The pshat is different. The case over here is what biyad ganev. What the Braisa is saying is the ganev steals it, and then the owner sees it got stolen already. So the original owner, goes ahead and is makdish it. So if the original owner went ahead and was makdish it, he declares it hektish while it's in the possession of the ganev. Now, if the ganev is going to go ahead and slaughter it, he's going to be potter for this. That's what this Braisa was saying. But really, there is no yish over here. We're talking about the original owner that was makdish. So this is no question on Rabbi Yochanan. But the Gemara asks on this answer, how could Rabbi Yochanan say this? So mi kaddish, if the original owner wants to be makdish it while it's in the possession of the ganev, can he do so? But v'amar Rabbi Yochanan himself said, Gazal, v'loy nisyashu abaylim, if you steal something and the original owner is not miyayish, shneim eini yechayim lakdishay. Both the original owner and the ganev cannot be makdish this now. Zel, if yishayin shaloi, the ganev can't be makdish it, it's not his. And even the original owner can't be makdish it, even though it's his, but he doesn't have possession over it. It's not in his rishus, so he can't be makdish it. So how could that be the pshari and the braise? So Omri, the answer to this, that who the Omar Kitsnuin. Over here, this braise is following a different opinion, which is the opinion of the Tznuin. These were modest or pious individuals that disagree with Rabbi Yochanan. And they say that you could be makdish something even if it's not in your possession. If you own it, but it's not in your possession. That nan, as we learned in the Mishnah, and what this Mishnah there is talking about is kerem revai, a vineyard in the 4th year. What do you have to do with this vineyard, with the grapes? It has to be brought to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Not allowed to eat it outside Yerushalayim. So these pious individuals, they didn't want people to come to the vineyard and just steal from it and eat from it without bringing it to Yerushalayim. So therefore, what did they do to save people from that Aveda? Hatznuin manichin esamois, they would put aside money that will be as a redemption to redeem the kedusha of these grapes. And they would say, Kol anilkat mizeh, anything that will be picked from these grapes, anyone that's coming and stealing and is eating from these grapes, yehei mechulul al ma'aseilu. It should be desecrated, and the kedusha should go on this money that's right over here. Okay, so what do you see over here? That these tznuin hold that these grapes that are being stolen and is not in their possession at all, but they can redeem it and say that the kedusha goes on the money. So over here as well, when this person stole, the original owner was makdish it, and that's what the Braisa is saying. The original owner has the power to be makdish it, and therefore, if you slaughter it, you're going to be potter. But the Gemara still asks on this, but But if that's the case over here, that the original owner went and was makdish it, so if so, doesn't that mean that they took possession over it? It goes back to them by the very fact that they were makdish it. So if it goes back to the original owner by the fact that they're being makdish it, so what does the Braisa say? The Braisa said that the Ganev does have to pay kefil. He doesn't pay dalat v'hei, but he pays kefil. So our understanding over here was he doesn't pay dalat v'hei. Why not? Because the original owner, was already makdish it. So now you're slaughtering something that belongs to hektish. But you do pay kefil because you stole it. But the question is, the moment the bailam is makdish it, it's like this item went back to the original owner. They repossessed it by being makdish it. You don't pay kefil. Rashi here brings, you don't pay kefil once the item is already returned to the original owner. You only pay kefil if the ganev is still possessing it. So why does it say that you pay kefil if they were already makdish it? And it says the Gemara Kisha Omad Bedin. The case over here is that there were already Edim that came to the Din Torah. Before the original owner was makdish it, there was already a Din Torah that paskind that you have to pay the kefil. So the psakdim was already before. In fact, the Gemara, the Gemara clarifies what the case is. Hey Chidami, what are we talking about over here? Ida Amri, if the Bezdin said, say tenloi, go, they paskin already, and they said, go out and pay him this, give it back to him. So then, if so, my irya hikdish. So why is the Bryce over here saying that the case is that he was makdish it, and therefore if you slaughter it, you don't have to pay dalat v'hei. Afil loy hikdish. Once there was a psak of the bezdin, a clear psak that bezdin says go and pay it. So even if you weren't makdish it, you shouldn't have to pay. Nami loy lechavi. You shouldn't have to pay dalat v'hei either. Why not? Rava said, what's the halacha after bezdin already paskind? Say 10 loy, if bezdin already paskind regarding an animal that you stole in your possession, and bezdin already paskind, you have to go and give it back. If you go and slaughter it or sell it, you're going to be potter for this. Why? My time. Even the pasku al milse. Once bezdin already paskin the case that you have to give it back. So and he goes and still and slaughters it or sells it. Havale gazlin. So now his status changes. He becomes a gazlin. He's not a ganav. He's a gazlan. What's the difference between a ganav and a gazlan? A ganav is someone that sneaks and steals. A gazlan is a person that comes by force and openly steals. If here, after the bezdin paskin that you're chayiv to give it back, and after that you go and you slaughter it, now you turn into a gazlan. The gazlan ain't a mashal tashlumi Bava Kama. The whole halacha of paying 4 or 5 times as much as similar to the halacha of kefil is only when you're a ganav, not when you're a gazlan. So over here, after bezdin paskin, you have to give it back, and you still shecht it, you're a gazlan. So there is no dalat v'hei over here in such a case. However, Rava goes on to say, if the psak of Bezdin was chayiv atalitin, Bezdin said that you're chayiv to pay, but Bezdin didn't go to the next step to implement the psak, to say, go out and give it. Then in such a case, if you slaughtered it or sold it, you still are going to have to pay dalat v'hei, because Bezdin is not yet at the stage where they're implementing the psak, so you still have the status of a ganev. So the Gemara says, my timer, what's the reason for this distinction? Kivin de paska milsa, because Bezdin didn't mamish take it to the next step of the psak din to implement the psak that you mamish have to pay akati ganavu. He's still in the status of a ganav. So the Gemara concludes and says, okay, so loy tzriche, the case of here of the Braise is the amri le chayiv atalitin loy. The Bezdin paskin that he has to give it, but Bezdin didn't say go ahead and give it. So in such a case, kefil you pay because you're still a ganev. But on the other hand, dalat v'hei you don't pay because the original owner was makdish it, and the original owner was makdish it. In such a case, there's no payment of dalat v'hei.